What's up, Internet? Harvest Build Destroy here, doing something a little different today. I'm here with Tatsu, a developer for an upcoming RTS called Sanctuary. How's it going, man? Thanks for doing this.
Hi, thank you. I'm doing good. It's Tatsu, by the way.
Tatsu,
I
sorry.
prefer that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
that's
trying
fine.
to do the Japanese pronunciation. I was just assuming, to be perfectly honest. But
No, no, that's fine.
let's start simple. What is Sanctuary?
All right. Sanctuary is a new RTS in development currently. It's not very far gone. It's about 10 months into development. And it's an RTS with a great scale, a great contrast in terms of like size of units and stuff like that. Simulated projectiles, streaming economy, strategic zoom. So lots of staples of a subcategory of RTS that you could say is Chris Taylor inspired. Like Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander, Zero K, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Right. And you've also talked quite a bit about this idea of multi-threading. In the past, these games have had some issues with performance when the games scale up to a grand scale. So it seems that there are certain modern technological workarounds to things that were more difficult in the past. Could you maybe explain a little bit about this idea of multi-threading?
Yeah, so what happens is that you're asking the computer to do something very complex.
Right.
These games have simulated projectiles, and what that means is that, your tank, your unit that you control is going to fire a shell, and the shell is going to actually, go through the trajectory, and whatever comes in between its trajectory, its targets, and itself, whatever comes into the trajectory at the right time is going to be actually where the impact is. There's effectively no way of seeing that ahead of time. It's just down to actually running the simulation, just going through the steps of, now the bullet is here, now the bullet is here. Okay, there's like a plane in the way, or there's a building in the way, or there's another unit in the way, or something, or the unit has moved and so it just hits the ground and does no damage. Most games, they have a transactional nature, right? There's gonna be units. I am within range of you. Please deduct 10 HP from your health pool. Okay, bye. Or it keeps going. But
Right.
the transaction happens in that time, and it's going to be offset with the delay, whatever's required because of the distance to between them and the time for the actual projectile to hit. But effectively, the decision that the damage is going to be applied has already been made, right? And it's just counting down the time to apply it, right?
Okay.
This is where you get things like in like, for example, League of Legends or something like that, where you teleport a unit, and you make it back to like your main guy. You make it back to the main base where you're protected and you have all your health pool. But then you die, because the damage that was, well, the hits, that was determined to be made back
Hmm.
then, is just timing out. And so yeah, so it's immersive because of that nature, but it's very computationally expensive.
Right.
You've got to figure it out by running through the steps, by calculating all that in real time, and there's really no other way to do it. That wouldn't be so much of an issue. Computers, your CPUs are very potent tools, right? They're capable of running through millions of calculations per second, right?
Hmm.
The problem is that there's going to be just a mass of those that's too great for even modern CPUs on a single thread to handle, but not
When
so
you say
for.
single thread, what do you mean by that?
Well, so computers have this component inside of them that's more or less the brain. It's the CPU. The
Hmm.
CPU is what runs, most of the calculations that happens on the computer. This piece of hardware, this chip, has either a single core or multiple core. These days, they almost all have multiple cores. And we consider a thread is a piece of code to be running on one of those cores. And simplifying here, but that's basically the idea. And nowadays, when you have, processors with a lot of cores, with, on top of that, hyper-threading, which is basically kind of like duplicating cores into two, you have a lot of available cores, which is places where the calculations can happen, which is essentially a whole compute unit in and of itself. And code most of the time is has a thread. It has a sequence of instructions. You're gonna do A. You're gonna do, when A is complete, you do B, and so this works when you're operating in this little box. I know that I have this set of instructions that are ordered like this, and I have to do them one after the other. But what you could be doing is running multiple of these instructions in parallel if you're able to split that up in the first place. If you're able to say, well, it doesn't matter if like this bit here isn't like I don't have the answer to that because core B is taking care of it while I'm computing it in core A. I can move on with this next set of instructions. So, and then you can start, splitting up tasks, right?
Right.
It's just it's just a matter of like figuring out how you can split up the tasks and still be able to come back with the same results, right? And if you're able to
Right.
do that, well, then you're able to utilize this hardware that more or less has not been really put to use, especially in the world of video games, right?
So would it
Most
maybe?
video games,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I was about to say most video games run on a single core.
Right.
Less and less that's the case, but like especially with older games, lots of RTSs. Yeah.
So, to try and simplify it for a layman such as myself, would it be fair to say that if we look at some of the older games in the genre that have had some performance issues, like, for example, Supreme Commander, back then they were kind of designed in the single core processor era, whereas now you have a better way of sort of spreading the burden across the multiple cores in a typical gaming PC? Is that more or less the basic idea, severely
Yeah,
simplified?
yeah, and honestly, like you can see that happening. So when Supreme Commander was releasing, the first commercially publicly available CPUs with multiple cores were already starting to hit the market. Well, the first dual Intel dual cores were hitting the market, and then there was Pentium and et cetera. They started to have multiple cores as well. But yeah, so the devs of Supreme Commander were already aware of that at the time. It's just that they had started out, in this world where multi-threading didn't really exist. So they did, kind of add it in towards the end of the development cycle, but just for like the UI. So they had a separate thread for running all of the UI, and that did like help with the load. But obviously not as much as could have been done, and this has been demonstrated with some of the games that have released since then that were in the same kind of vein. Like for example, if you take Planetary Annihilation, this is also a multi-threaded game, and Ashes of the Singularity as well. And they really leaned heavily on that aspect. That was one of their really important shticks.
Right.
But yeah, so the fact of the matter is that like the technology is there, people are aware of it, it's available, it's already started to be used correctly to that effect. We're simply doing that as well, and we're also taking into account like the evolutions that have happened in terms of software
Right.
on in that regard.
So there are quite a few iterations on this subgenre at this point. We got 0K, of course, Supreme Commander Total Annihilation. We got Beyond All Reason, which actually I hadn't heard of until I heard you talk about it. But
Yeah.
there's also Ashes of the Singularity you mentioned. Arguably Rusted Warfare. I don't know if you consider that, but to be a part
Oh
of it.
yeah.
But
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
is there are a lot of games that have innovated in different directions. So how familiar versus brand new are you guys aiming for with Sanctuary? How familiar to players of these different games are you aiming for it to be, I guess?
Well, it's a bit of like a 60-40 with like more 60% familiarity, more 40% new. There's like if you're talking about just the circle of these games, these simulated projectile games in particular, then in that case is probably more like 80% familiar, 20% new. We
Right.
do have like new elements, but yeah, it's also good to make sure that you're not alienating your core audience. You're respecting their what they hold dear, what they really
Right.
want to see in an RTS, and what they've essentially been waiting for years and years and years. So yeah, it's kind of a balancing out with what all the cool features that you want to throw in and everything, and what actually makes that into a nice recipe in terms of balance, in terms of gameplay, in terms of what's fun. So yeah, and I think like we have like yeah, we on our team in our hard media for Sanctuary, we have a pretty good notion of what these elements are, what makes a game fun,
Right.
what makes an RTS fun, what makes it balance, what all these all these crucial points, and,
Right.
and in particular what our audience wants.
So to start basic, this will be a game with a commander unit, like your king piece, that is sort of like your
Yeah,
main builder. It's very
yeah,
powerful, but if
yeah.
you lose it, the game is over.
Yeah, I love calling it a king piece because I feel like that's a really illustrative way of putting it, right?
Right.
Like everybody knows chess, and that's you've got this peon on the board, which if you lose the game,
Right.
and this is kind of well, we believe it's a really really good game mechanic. It's a really clever way of doing RTS, right? And of
Yeah.
course, you've got the map control, you've got the global thing, like will you be able to win out and everything, but you got this
Yeah.
secondary kind of like objective, I would say, or like the big objective, but going on in parallel as the rest of the whole map control thing, which is if you kill this one piece, you
Right.
also win. So that's it's really interesting. It's really clever because the gameplay there becomes a balancing act for the player, where it's like really tempting to go for it now, but I might be sacrificing map control for this attempt on getting the king piece.
Right.
So yeah, we're definitely having that mechanic.
But more specifically, it can move a hell of a lot more than one square.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful piece. And now I remember in my own experience playing Total Annihilation, or rather more so spectating. It was late in the game's lifespan. It was played on a third-party client called Warzone with a fairly small population. I managed somehow to befriend the top player, and he let me spec his games. And I remember one thing he mentioned was that they had this sort of gentleman's agreement not to do any like forward commander tactics. Is that something you guys are wary of in designing your game, making sure that there is a balance there? I don't remember if it was considered overpowered or just produced uninteresting gameplay. Is that something you guys are thinking about? The idea of forward commander tactics?
Well, it's interesting. I'm just like learning about it now. I didn't know that like Total Annihilation had this gentleman's agreement with the commander. I imagine that like because I didn't play Total Annihilation competitively. I actually haven't played much Total Annihilation at all, to be perfectly honest.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I can kind of get that because like Total Annihilation was it was built first and foremost for that single player experience. It did have
Right.
multiplayer and everything, but like I don't think the devs necessarily like imagine how much Total Annihilation would blow up and everything, and I
Yeah.
think this was emblematic of some of the things that like Jeff Petko said in his interviews and Chris Taylor said in his interviews. Is like that once you have like all this attention to what you should be doing with balance and everything like that, it means you've actually done something right, which is to
Right.
succeed, which is to actually sell your game, like to actually hit a big audience with your game. And
Yeah.
so they were really happy that they got this far with Total Annihilation. What I imagine happens there is that like it really wasn't built for multiplayer for
Right.
player versus player balance, right? And so it's very possible that there may have been a lot of overpowered tricks.
Oh
I
yeah.
know that, like for example, um, uh, the Spiffing Brit did a YouTube video where he showed the exploits of Total Annihilation, and so I learned about, for example, the transports where you can pick up the enemy commander exploit. I didn't even know about that, and there's like a whole bunch of other ones that he showed. So yeah, evidently Total Annihilation wasn't play tested for multiplayer
Yeah.
at all.
When I was spectating it, it had like everyone played ARM, no one played Core, and the land maps. It was like a one unit spam meta. But even within that context, there was still a lot going on, and I mean that just shows that there's clearly something there, even though the balance is real wonky.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like it's a brilliant game that hit a huge market. Like you talk to people and you're like, "Oh, have you ever heard of Supreme Commander?" And they're like, "Nah, no." And you're like, "Oh, have you heard of Total Annihilation?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I heard about that one." And so it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it really like hit people when it came out. It was like really, really a big viral hit, and even people who were not even like core gamers or stuff like that got it and tried it
Yeah.
out or at least heard about it and everything. So yeah, it was, and I can totally see why because Chris Taylor really did change the game with what what he experimented with, what he did
Yeah.
there. It was like obviously every idea is just transformational. You've
Yeah.
got inspiration and things that you're paying homage to and things that you're learning from and stuff like that. But yeah, the degree to which TA was transformational, I think, was very high because
Yeah.
there were a lot of things that felt like really new ideas in
There was
that,
nothing
and
like it in the '90s.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was like with all these like no, I'm rambling about Chris Taylor here, but anyways, with all his styles, it was always like not only innovational with the gameplay and everything, but it was always also pushing the limits in terms of technology, in terms of
Right.
what you can do with graphics, what you can do with the CPU and everything. It was really putting that hardware to work. Even with TA, I mean, TA was, it ran on a potato, really. It ran
Yeah.
on nothing, but it was still really impressive for the time because it was this isometric 3D. So, you got the more or less the impression that you were looking at your typical like 2D sprite type game, but actually the simulation and everything is happening in 3D space. And that's simply because there was no other, workaround for that, right? And he wanted to have the simulation in there because that made the gameplay like really immersive and interesting.
Right.
And so yeah, and so as a result, you have something that's like really ahead of its time technologically, also. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, ramble over.
I'm sure people appreciate it. So another hallmark, aside from the commander unit of these types of games, is the flow economy, or I think you call it the flux economy.
Yeah, so people like in these communities have different terms for it. I've
Yeah.
heard, like I've gotten used to Flux a lot recently. I've realized that apparently more people globally use
Hmm.
streaming. There's flow based, there's Flux, there's all those terms.
Right.
So yeah, basically the idea is that you have you're gonna have generated income that's generated per second of time that passes in
Right.
game, and you have a consumption of resources that's so income outcome, very kind of like down to earth kind of thing. It's not like, well, I'm gonna buy this house. In real
Hmm.
life, you don't go, well, here's the full 500 grand for the apartment or the house or whatever, or
Right.
I don't know how much it is now, a million, whatever. The full money. I've saved it up correctly, as one should. I'm
Hmm.
not taking any loans.
Right.
Yeah. So it's more. It's also more immersive in that regard that you're just, I want to be spending this right now. I want to be building this thing. It's not a question of do I have that in the bank. It's a question of
Right.
I want to be building this thing, so I am. And now it's a question of, well, this thing takes this time to build, so it's going to be building for a while, and while I'm building it, I'm inputting resources into it. The closest example that people might have to that is something like Age of Empires 2, where you have like the wonders and whatever. You're going to have the villagers that are working on that for a while, right?
Right.
And I think
In
that it
single
does
player,
consume.
nobody plays with Wonder Victory, but anyway.
Yeah. Right. That's true. Yeah. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure if it like consumes the resources bit by bit, or if you have to have like the entire
You
sum.
pay a
Right.
lump sum up front in Age of Empires, yeah.
Okay. Well, then
Yeah.
that's a bad example.
Maybe
But
repairing
yeah.
is kind of like that.
Right.
But
Right.
in
Okay.
these types of games, it's sort of like everything you decide to build incurs like a drain rate on your resources, right? And you have to balance
That's
that
right.
based on how much is in your stockpile.
That's right. And you know why I was thinking of Age of Empires 2? The thing that's similar is that you can put multiple builders on a building. Like, for example,
Right.
in StarCraft, you can only have one SCV working on like a factory or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In Age of Empires 2, you can have like multiple villagers working on a wonder or whatever.
Right.
And when you're doing that, I assume that it's consuming more resources per second, or is it just like
Actually, it's not consuming more resources. What it does is like there's a curve for like how fast it goes up, and each villager is like
right?
worth less towards the build time.
All right.
The hotspot
Okay.
is 3 or 4 in terms of
Right.
efficiency,
Right. Right.
but yeah, it doesn't consume more resources, but it does indirectly in the sense that those villagers aren't working.
Right.
Age of
Okay. Okay.
Empires is a
Okay.
kind of game where you're really petty about like every villager always working. So in a sense, it is
Yeah.
doing something similar in a different way.
So I actually, that I think that gets down to it, right? What you would be doing in a streaming economy, in a flux economy,
Right.
is that you can have multiple builders, and you can assign as many as you want on a certain thing, on construction, even on assisting like your barracks or whatever for producing units, right? They have build power. They can they can construct at X rate per second, and instead you're going to be consuming, and everything is like you have all the stats for everything, so you
Right.
can know ahead of time. You can also see it in real time if you want. You can turn on like an economy overlay, and then you can actually see what this unit at this present time is consuming per second. And so it's all a question of income versus outcome. You have your bank and everything, and you have like a max storage for your bank of resources.
Right.
And it's all a question of, well, I want to avoid getting down to zero, but I definitely don't want to get to 100% because I can only store 100%. Everything that I produce in terms of resources beyond that 100% is just wasted into the void, right?
Right.
So I constantly want to be doing what we call floating or surfing on these economy bars, which is keeping them somewhere in the middle or somewhere closest to zero as possible. Because obviously, the more
Right.
you're spending, the more you're being competitive with your opponents. So yeah, and it's an economy that has a tendency to really scale like exponentially. Like really,
Right.
like, if you take those games like StarCraft, like Age of Empires and stuff like that, they do scale like really, they scale a lot. It gets to crazy situations where you have like X amount of town centers and
Yeah.
villages. That's completely crazy, but it makes perfect sense when you're really playing this competitively.
Yeah.
But it's still a linear, curve in terms of like how it scales. Whereas with games like Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander, Zero K, Bar, etc., it's an exponential curve. You're gonna be generating a little bit of economy with those things, but the later tech is gonna generate more economy per second, and
Right.
also you're gonna have more map control. So you multiply those two factors together. Later in the game, you can start crossing that with actually generating resources on top of like harvesting them, and so it gets into crazy crazy
Right.
situations with the economy. And so yeah, it's all feeding into this sense of crazy scale is
Right.
more fun. You can do a lot of things with that. You can have more units. You can have units that cost an extreme amount and that can take out a large number of units from a lower tech. But that's fine because that's the whole fun of it. You've got this thing that you've poured a whole lot of resources into, and now you're wielding it and you're laying waste to your adversaries.
Right.
Lots of fun situations like that, right? So that's kind of like what this type of economy lends itself to, as well as being like really really, what you see is what you get, right? And very very down to earth, very very brutally honest about like how things are.
Yeah, and if you... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like the flip side to that is that obviously you've gotta know how to navigate it well, because if you're just overspending, then you're putting yourself in this situation of, well, I've produced 50 resources for this second, but I'm consuming 500 resources per second. I've got to split all these 10 ways for these different things that I'm producing. So all of my things are producing 10 times slower. And so
Right.
now I'm just like not at all competitive with my opponents. So yeah, that's the flip side of that.
Right, that's exactly what I was going to ask you about. That if you are in a deficit and you don't have anything in the bank, you're punished pretty harshly for it in your rate of production.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
typically,
Yeah.
these flow economies have two resources. You have like your main resource, which is mass, metal, etc. in
Mm,
TA and Subcom, where it's sort of like the overall production capacity, right? Like it's your basic resource, and you have to balance it with what's usually called energy, which is sort of like it kind of limits the rate at which you can do things, from what I can tell. So with Sanctuary, are you going to be doing something similar to this, or how are you approaching the specific resources in your
Yeah,
flow
I
economy?
guess what you're referring to is like the creating a dynamic between the two resources,
Right.
where like not having one of the two resources affects the production of the other
Yeah.
resource, which is an interesting mechanic to have, and yeah, I think we'd much rather have that mechanic. It's not something that like we're 100% on, but it's something that we
Right.
really think does add depth to the whole production. It's not just like I have to have rubies and diamonds and whatever, right? Who cares? It can
Right.
be called anything. And now it actually kind of matters. Not only does it matter that like one of the resources is something that that's incredibly abundant, that's incredibly easy to get, and that you have in like great quantities, and the other is like super rare and super hard to get, and you can only get it on some specific places and stuff like that.
Right.
But on top of that, there's a dynamic between the two, and then I think that's like a really good thing. One thing to note though is that like sometimes it's actually three resources, and that third resource is population, right? And
Right.
indeed, like in games like Total Annihilation, 0K, I think as well, and Supreme Commander, there isn't that third resources, but it is though in like for example Homeworld. And I
Right. You
do
mean like
qualify.
a pop cap, like a supply limit.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Which is something that like people generally don't like necessarily they tune it out and everything, but it is a third resource or fourth or whatever, depending on how many resources you have beside that.
Right.
But yeah,
So is that
So
something
that's
you're looking to incorporate into Sanctuary?
no. I don't think we'll. I mean, like, we will do this thing where you have like a maximum number of units you can build, like maybe like
Right.
1,000 or 1,500 or something like that. Probably depending on how many players are in the game.
Right.
But you won't have to like do anything. They won't interact with your gameplay other than you've actually hit that cap and
Yeah. I,
like hitting that cap.
yeah. I think you can argue that the flow economy kind of has a similar dynamic built into it, because the whole point of a population or supply limit is kind of to punish like just massing up units to go and kill someone really quickly. So like the balancing act of the flow economy has that sort of concept kind of baked into it, if that makes any sense. At least as far as I can
Yeah,
tell.
that does make sense. Yeah, well, I mean, like it's also like I think it's also a question of game design. Like you have a lot more things to be looking out for. So adding that on top of the rest is just it's starting to have like a little bit too many ingredients in the pot. I guess that your way of presenting it is perfectly valid also.
Right. So now I know you have three factions so far in the game, and it sounds like you're trying to go a little farther down the path of asymmetry than a lot of other games in this subgenre. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. That's the reason why we're like limiting ourselves to three factions. There's a lot of games that are kind of half and half on this issue. I would say that like in particular, if you take the examples of like Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander, Planetary Annihilation, etc.
Hmm.
They were like, well, faction diversity doesn't matter that much. It's not really that interesting of a mechanic. And in terms of like, for example, multiplayer, you highlighted the issue very well. But like, for example, in Total Annihilation, they're only playing one faction, so they really didn't like
Right.
put that much heart into balancing and into the asymmetry that was there, resulting in something that was not interesting to play in a multiplayer context. Planetary Annihilation went the way of having one faction.
Right.
They have another one modded in, but it's still not balanced. And Supreme Commander went the way of having multiple factions for. Also, there's a fifth one modded in now.
Right.
But these factions are very very similar, so it's interesting, kind of like in how you play in Ages of Empire when you're Age of Empires when you're switching between factions, you're not too lost, right? You're not like starting over again. It's
In the
not as hard
first two,
as
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely not as hard as like, especially when you're starting out. People now might know what I'm talking about with
Hmm.
StarCraft, but like starting out with StarCraft, it's kind of hard to switch between factions, especially if you've like started with one, played particularly with one, and then
Right.
you're trying out. You're going from Terran to Zerg, and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And yeah, and so we feel like that kind of dynamic that StarCraft has with like diversity and more of more differences between the factions,
Right.
how they feel and play and everything. That's definitely interesting, and we wanna experiment with that, right?
So will they have
So
fundamentally? Oh,
that's
sorry. Go ahead.
no, yeah. I was saying that like that's one of the important reasons why we have to have limit ourselves in number of factions, because it's basically really two opposing levers that when you pull one, it pulls the other in the other direction. So
Right.
if you have like a ton of factions, it's really hard to have that and be balanced and have a lot of factional diversity.
Yeah.
If you have fewer factions, you can have a lot of factional diversity and be balanced. So yeah, that's the way that we're going.
So are you looking towards like fundamentally different macro mechanics for each faction, the way that Zerg and Terran and so on have different ways of producing things, or is it more going to be asymmetry in terms of the units and buildings and so on that they have available?
Probably more of the latter. We'll probably, experiments with a bit of both. There's a lot of things that will probably feel like it's affecting the macro style gameplay,
Right.
and that it feels, different. That might really be a thing. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I want it to be to feel like the factions are much more diverse than say in Total Annihilation or Supreme Commander or Zero K or those types of
Right.
things.
Will there be
And
any
that's
overlap?
definitely a lot of leeway, a lot of things that can be done there. And we don't want it to be like completely diametrically opposed either. Not so
Hmm.
much because of the gameplay, but also because of how hard the balancing of these factions becomes.
Right.
And we're being respectful of our conscious of our level of experience here. We're not going to claim that we're going to be able to pull off incredible feats of balancing, right?
Right.
So making the task easier for ourselves is a concern there, and that's it's probably something that we'll be able to dig deeper into faction asymmetry
Hmm.
once we've had the game out for like a half a year or a year. Then we'll probably start to try adding to it, because we'll probably be able to feel more confident that we can also balance it. Yeah.
So there will be some overlap between the factions, but less than maybe people are accustomed to.
Yeah, well, I mean, like starting with like the basics, like all of the factions have a king piece
Right.
that you wanna take out. All of them work on flow-based economy and use the two same type resources,
Hmm.
and things like that. But maybe one of the factions has an ability across the board for all of its buildings to hunker down, to go underground, and come back up after like some sort of explosive threat has passed. Maybe one of the factions has some kind of teleporting ability, and then the rest of them don't.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things that can be done there, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Any plans for asymmetries among the commander units, or are they going to be the same for each faction, other than cosmetically?
Oh no, they're going to be quite different. Like for example, if you look at Supreme Commander as an example,
Hmm.
the commanders have each have upgrades, and in each faction the upgrades are different. Like if something like going to the next tech level and stuff like that, that's available for all the different factions, of course. But then they each have lots of differences in what they can do. One faction has like attack missile that upgrades into actually being able to launch a small nuke from the commander. One of them has well, the same one has drone shoulders that can build. Then there's one that's able to upgrade into a lethal unit in and of itself, like an experimental type unit. Have stealth, cloaking, torpedoes. There's like one of them has what's it called? Well, they call it chrono dampener, but that's not gonna mean much to you. The thing that takes out all electronics, the
Oh,
explode
EMP type thing.
EMP. Thank you. So yeah, there's like those are already like the king pieces in Supreme Commander are already incredibly factionally diverse. They could be a lot
Right.
more, and we'll see what we do there. But we definitely want to keep them like factionally diverse. We don't
Right.
want to have like the same exact thing going on.
To return to the idea of commander rushes, with those kinds of upgrades, it almost sounds like you could turn that into an interesting dynamic instead of one that's just abusive.
Oh well, like I mean, like so I'm someone who's well versed in the competitive scene of Supreme Commander. It's a game that's like incredibly active
Right.
in this day and age. And yeah, the competitive scene is great. Thanks to like the Forge Alliance Forever clients, they've really balanced it, and I mean it was a game that was already on a pretty good footing in terms of balance to begin with. I mean, some minor exceptions occurred in like late game T3 Air. The T3 gunship for Aeon in particular was a notable example back when the game released. Even the Steam version has that patched now. But like it was already quite well balanced to begin with, but like this community has made the balance evolve a lot and change with time, because that's probably what I would say is the most important thing to keep a multiplayer community going, is to have the balance evolve, right? There's no like perfect form in terms of infinity of time, right? For
Right.
for balance. Balance is something that evolves with the players as they migrate to new metas and become interested in newer dynamics and stuff like that. Like there's infinite creativity already
Right.
within the tools that are given to the players via the game, but there's also a nomadic behavior with gameplay in the multiplayer community, and so you want to cater to that, which I believe FAF has done. And so yeah,
Hmm.
the commander gameplay in FAF is particularly interesting. I mean, like obviously the dynamic of having a king piece that if you lose it, you lose the game, but you really probably want to use it aggressively in some form because of how
Right.
good it can be, how good it can be for the result of your game. So you're really ultimately you're playing with fire, but boy, if the results aren't worth it, it's a gamble that's very interesting, and it gets played quite a lot, in particular in the early game. And so there's a lot of those upgrades that are used. A lot of people do turn their commander into a glass cannon, and it just pays off brilliantly. And there's so many different ways of doing that, right?
Right.
You can transport it because like in Supreme Commander you can also get a teleportation upgrade where you can teleport to any distance across the map. Given it just takes a lot of energy. It's a
Right.
very late game upgrade, but you can do so many things with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it says here so far you're aiming for about 50 units per faction. So a pretty big
Yeah,
tech
that,
tree here.
huh?
So a pretty big tech tree.
Yeah, I mean, like when we say units, we mean we include buildings in that, and that's by the
Oh,
way
okay, right.
for the MVP, right? The full if we get like to really develop the whole shebang with this game, there'll be about 100 units per faction,
Right.
maybe 90 something like that, but basically close to 100. But yeah, there's a lot of things to add, once you have like all the you have different tech levels.
Hmm.
At each tech level, well, you have a whole bunch of options, not only in terms of buildings but in terms of units, and each tech level adds a whole lot of specialized units. I'd call them units that have this a special ability, something that's quite useful that you want to throw into the mix. That's gonna really allow it to deal with a lot more different situations. Oh, there's this ship that's out at sea that's pummeling me. Well, I may have a unit at Tech 2 that can deal with that, or
Right.
there's oh, they have a whole bunch of shields. Well, here's a unit that deals damage exclusively to shields, and that does it in a really efficient manner. Or they have X defenses, these point defenses, turrets that are placed there. Well, this artillery or missile unit is going to be quite good at dealing from that because it does so from outer range. So on and so forth. So and you can get into some like really really specialized units. Maybe like look at what StarCraft does. You have some utility units in there, like for example the mole, which which launches sorry,
Oh,
the
the
widow
swarm
mine.
host. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. The widow
Yeah,
mine.
there's I mean there's a whole bunch of examples which are like really good. You don't have to have only you don't have to have units that are necessarily dealing direct damage to have a
Right.
unit that's incredibly useful. And so yeah, and we want to do this thing where mostly, especially before like the very very late game, mostly units have one function, right?
Right.
This way you're actually building that unit for that function, and you're really putting to use the simulation of the projectiles. That really works out best when each unit gets to fire its arc, and it's relatively long distances, and then there's different types of projectiles that are going on. One is like a laser; it's going straight forward. It has to be have direct line of sight. One is more high arcing, and then it can go over things, and then you have the ones that are more targeting, like following the target and everything. There's ones that are just like there's all sorts, and then there's the projectiles that can be targeted themselves by your defense solutions. So you can get into like this really vibrant and complex battlefield. I don't know. I'm just
Right.
fascinated by this.
Yeah. So any so it sounds like there might be some almost spellcaster like properties to some units that are not the commander then?
There might, I mean, we really want to keep that to a minimum because
Right.
I mean, as I mentioned before, with the type of scale that this incredibly
Might be too zoomed in to
exponential
do that sort of
economy
thing.
brings, it becomes interesting with a lot of units, right? And that's kind of like the whole reason. Like, if we were simulating projectiles for 10 or 50 units each, and that was like your unit cap, you wouldn't
Hmm.
need, multi-threading for that, and a
Right.
single thread could totally do that. However, since simulating of projectiles and flux economy and all that stuff becomes really interesting when you have 100 or 200 or 500 or even 1,000 units under your control. Well, then you this is the kind of game that we're dealing for. And
Right.
honestly, in the competitive space, generally these types of games don't like really bust over 200 units per players, even if it reaches like the late stages of the game. If
Right.
the players are like evenly matched, and like it's
They're dying.
and decently competent and everything like that, there's it's gonna last for 30 minutes, something like that.
Right.
Probably not that much longer, and probably won't go into like crazy amounts of units, right? But it's good that we support that as well, because right, this way we can also cater to the single players out there, and there's like a whole bunch of them who just like to mess around with a comp stomp, where they're gonna really build these
Right.
these gigantic battlefields and everything. And I know that, like, for example, with the Warhammer games that people play, like Warhammer 2, Warhammer 40K.
The Total War ones.
Yeah, well, not only the Total War ones, but there was like, I
Dawn of
think it
War.
was Dawn of War, yeah, Dawn of
Yeah.
War 2.
Those are very small scale games.
Yeah, they
Well, the
are, but
second one.
I mean, like, if you see like some of the videos that they make, they like to focus on like the big battles with like a whole bunch of units, and like big hunking units versus like smaller units and all that stuff, right?
Right.
And so, like, people who play in single player, they love this kind of stuff. They love like having setting up these massive battles and just like going to town.
Right. So you're
Yeah.
anticipating that on a competitive level, the scale will end up being smaller because there'll be more fighting, and just you won't get to that point because everything's dying so constantly. But in the team games and so on, you're looking to support like a huge number of units on screen at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, what are you calling team games? Are you calling versus? Is that
Like
what you
large
call it?
scale games with like 4 on 4, that sort of thing.
Well, 4 on 4 for me is like versus humans, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, yeah, yeah. But like, yeah. I mean, like, team games doesn't necessarily increase that much the number of units that there's going to be per player, right?
Okay.
Um, Even in that case, like, if you're talking higher level competitive, it's gonna not gonna go into like really. I mean, it might, but like, honestly, like I said, it generally doesn't, because they're able to conclude before then, right? There,
Right.
you have a you have this king piece and this victory condition. It's just a question of making it happen, which, of course, obviously late game you have a lot of things preventing that, to making it a lot harder. But still, you also, on the flip side, have things that are so insane in terms of damage and everything, that it's just a matter of
Right.
time that you're going to get through.
Right. So
So yeah.
the grand scale is possible. It's just that in realistic in-game scenarios with skilled players, it's probably not going to get to that stage terribly often.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's like the key thing here, is that it's possible, because like this is interesting for different sets of people. And we like to, we like to mainly focus on the multiplayer verse, right?
Right.
But there's polls and stats, well, in particular in the Forge Alliance, the Supreme Commander community, have let us know that actually, there's a majority, 60% or more
Right.
of players that play single player only. And, that doesn't surprise me at all, because, there's like a lot of people who are like, well, I can't like necessarily put myself in that mindset right now. I just want to chill, right?
Right.
So there's a huge audience for that, and we'd like to have built our engine from the ground up to be able to cater to that, because you can't really add in the support for like the 10,000 units after the fact. That's really hard to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So you alluded to this earlier, but essentially you have a set of features that you're currently planning to launch with, but you're going to do a Kickstarter. And based on the success or otherwise of that, there's another set of features that you're looking to include in the game. Could you tell us a
That's
bit
right.
more about that?
Yeah, so what we're building right now is the multiplayer experience. At least,
Right.
what we can get to like a bare minimum of multiplayer experience. Just a bit of context here: we are not a pre-existing studio with like a
Right.
lot of history or a lot of titles under our belts. We're a bunch of modders that are or that have a professional experience either in web development or back end development.
Right.
There is a member on our team who has 10 years plus of game development experience, but that about sums it up.
Right.
And this is a new studio, and we're founding this with two guys founding this with their life savings.
Right.
So that is not allowing us to take that very far. We're gonna run out of funds
Right.
by the end of 2021. But by then perhaps we've put together already a multiplayer, basic multiplayer that can satisfy the needs of to a degree of a lot of players. What we're hoping that to accomplish is to present this what we've done, as well as a pitch for building on top of that a single player experience. We want to develop AI. We want to
Right.
put together a whole campaign. All the bells and whistles that make a full AAA RTS, right?
Right.
I guess like you could compare that to what Iron Harvest did. I mean, I don't know. They
Right.
ran a Kickstarter, and it was quite successful.
Yeah.
And
They unfortunately
and yeah,
didn't deliver on everything that they said they would in the
no,
release
yeah,
version, but
yeah.
they
I
have
feel the
since.
same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, so the idea is we wanna make a lot more build a lot more than what we have the funds to do, but like
Right.
we're focusing right now on what we do have the funds to do. And that's, I think like the big takeaway here is that, should our Kickstarter fail, there will still be a game.
Right.
Don't take that as an incentive to not back us, of course, because it would be way better. Like what we could do is, as I said, implement an AI, a full campaign, the full set, of units for all three factions,
Right.
Navy, the replay functionalities, possibly rewinding replays and opening them up at a certain point in the replay, and picking up play with, like, for example, one of the players as picked up by an AI, or even as another player you could host that as a new game, like the
Right.
save points.
A
Right,
very
and
useful educational tool that I wish
yeah,
every
yeah,
game would have.
yeah, there
Yeah.
could be a lot that could be done with that. I mean, like, Planetary Annihilation promised it, and then StarCraft promised it. Never came to pass.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, anyways, it's something that like our engine at its core supports. It's just
Right.
a question of like, really implementing it, and really cramming down that data into a much smaller space. So a lot of optimization, a lot of compression.
Right.
Yeah, but it's doable. Like technically, it's doable. So yeah, there's we have like a lot of really tempting things that we want to do
Right.
with this game, and yeah, it's just I guess that's all it boils down to is like the smallest, garage indie game kind of experience versus the
Right.
AAA kind of experience. And either way, it'll be a win for RTS players out there because
Right.
it's been a dry spell kind of. So
Yeah. Although things are
yeah.
looking up, I think in that regard, we got a lot of new games cropping up. So you
That's
are,
exactly what I was thinking. Like
yeah,
there's really a brand new kind of gold rush for
yeah,
RTS right now. And it's hitting at like just the right time for us because like you think that studios and stuff like that would want to be like alone and uncontested in the market and everything, but actually it's incredibly healthy because like the more you have an offer, the more there's actually demand. It's called artificial demand. It's demand
right.
that's created by supply being brought in and be like, well, don't you want this? And I'm like, now that it's there, yeah, I kind of do,
Right.
so it really helps that there's like Age of Empires 4 coming out
Yep.
and
Now Company of Heroes 3 as well from Relic.
yeah, as well as Homeworld 3. I'm
Really?
hyped for that one.
That I've
Yeah,
not heard about.
you didn't know about that one?
No. This is
Oh,
this Relic as well?
no, this is Black Box Interactive.
Oh, okay.
Don't count on Relic. But anyways, Blackbird Interactive. Hold on, I'm just confirming that. But yeah, um,
Is that the company that did the I'm trying to remember Deserts of Karak or something? There
Desert
was
Carrick. Yeah.
okay.
Is it them who's doing Homeworld 3? Let me just check.
I had not even heard of that.
Yeah, they ran a thick campaign a while back. Yeah, it's Blackbird Interactive. Yeah. So yeah, and it's great. The story behind like Homeworld Deserts of Karak is amazing as well. Did you know that that game was originally supposed to be called Hardware Shipbreakers?
I did not. I actually haven't played
Yeah.
it myself. I'm aware of it.
It was not at all, a Homeworld IP game, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the basically kind of ultra fans of the Homeworld verse and everything, but they were making their own IP, right? They have this own idea and everything like that.
Right.
And I forget which big publisher going down or something like that resulted in there being an auction for the IP of Homeworld and everything.
Oh, okay.
But that happened, and they Blackbird Interactive went for that, and they lost the auction. But the person who won the auction was like, actually, we like what you guys are doing and everything, and here you guys can actually use this, and you can rebrand your game to Homeworld, and we're gonna work together and everything. And that kind of happened.
Cool.
That whole collaboration happened with like the remaster of Homeworld happening kind of in like in parallel.
Right.
Came out after, but like anyways, I love that story. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So we got a combination of major AAA developers and indies now, which is really cool to see. Like there's also that
Yeah.
Immortal Gates of Pyre game that looks really
Yeah.
promising.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like I've got my finger on the pulse of all these things. I'm in their
Right.
Discord and everything, interacting with them.
Cool.
We're hoping to get like cross promotion going. We've
Right on.
gotten like the access to the alpha already. This way we can
Cool.
like be like Sanctuary devs playing Immortal and
Yeah.
vice versa whenever we have our build and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, we did that with a lot of different communities. We did that with like, what was it? Um, no, I'm forgetting. So Emma Box Studios, the guy that do Eximius, sees the front line. It's a
Okay.
hybrid RTS FPS,
I have not
and
heard of that one.
yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm getting sidetracked.
But to return to your Kickstarter, you're currently planning to run that in December, is it?
Yeah.
And is there a figure you guys are looking to raise, or you prefer not to announce that just yet? Or
Oh, it would be too soon to say that. We've got like we're really hesitant to announce like a public figure until we've really settled on the number
right,
because
right.
it's kind of hard to gauge like how much support we could actually get. There is interest
Right.
already, but it'd be more than the interest that we think it is. So we don't want to we don't want to lowball ourselves. We don't want to highball either.
Right.
We want to get it just right.
Yeah, yeah.
So until we get like really specific numbers on what's our actual audience, we'd
Right.
rather hold out.
So this is one of those websites where if you don't reach the figure, everyone is refunded. Is that the idea?
Well, that's yeah, Kickstarter works
Okay.
like that.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you also do have a Patreon if people just want to support you right away, right?
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah. And the Patreon gives you access to like, well, a lot of exclusive content, a lot of content earlier. You get it like
Right.
a week or 2 weeks earlier than everybody else on the Discord.
Right.
So yeah.
Will there be any, like, for example, when you finally have your beta version, will there be like early access for supporters or anything like that? Or are you just looking to get as
Um,
many people in as possible?
You know what? That's a good question. Maybe I mean like we want to be open here. Like we don't want to feel like we don't want people to feel like we're really being like the thing is we're gonna have like a lot of different stages. So maybe that's what it's gonna be when we really would just want to have like 10 or 20 or so people, right? So we're probably gonna be like looking in the Patreons or stuff like that. But eventually, it's going to get to the point where we just want to have a lot of people testing it to really
Right.
stress test it, and then we just won't really discriminate, you know.
Right.
So yeah,
And maybe we should emphasize to the people who are looking to play this in single player, please support the Kickstarter because that's only going to happen if the Kickstarter is successful. Correct?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the single player is if that's what you're interested in, really do
Yeah.
come on D-Day on in December on our Kickstarter because that's how it's going to happen. And yeah, I think that like there's a lot of things that this game will really benefit from. Fundamentally, not only the
Right.
single player. If we can implement all of those extra tools like really flesh them out, like really flesh out AI and stuff like that, then that's like a lot of and really flesh out like the replay mechanisms and stuff like that. Then there's a whole lot of things that modders can build up on top of. So yeah, our game is already built to be moddable from the ground up.
Right.
But like the more features that the more core features that we implement, the more we make like life easier for future modders.
Right. And you do have some developers who are working on like the lore behind the game and starting to think about campaigns and so on, right?
Well, this no, I mean that saying yes to that would be mischaracterizing it. Like we
Okay.
have people that are very good at code. We have people that like we I don't have anyone on the team that I would qualify as a good writer or stuff like that. We
Okay.
we did, make our own lore and everything like that.
Right.
But yeah, where we're not none of us are like credited writers or anything like
Right.
that. And so that's fine. Like a lot of developers and everything put out great lores and everything. But like we're not focusing hard on that because as I said, like right now we're really trying to make sure that when we get to December or January of 2022, we have
Right.
a game, something that people can play. And for that, we just have to like really keep it to the bare minimum. But we did take time out to write a core of lore. It's
Right.
available on the Discord. You can
Okay.
check it under the lore channel. It's in the pins.
Okay. And in terms of monetization, you are not looking to nickel and dime everybody to death, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that like in the RTS verse, it's more common that you're gonna have this pay, one time your lump sum,
Right.
as opposed to streaming economy. Where yeah, you just buy your copy of your game and you're good, right?
Right.
Maybe there's a standalone extension or something like that, but that's it, right? There's no in-game microtransactions or anything like that because that just it's not that like you couldn't make that work with the genre. It's just that like the players are not into that kind of stuff, and I don't think we can make our audience interested in that. Nor
Right.
are we interested in doing that ourselves. Like, honestly, this is a game that we're making. This is a game made by gamers for gamers.
Right.
The my primary objective here is to be able to play my game,
Right.
my game. I
Yeah.
want to just play it. I don't care like all that much about like the financial aspect. I mean, if
Right.
it can feed me and everything, that'd be great. But like really, this comes from a place of passion and for
Right.
everybody on the team, right? Because we've been wanting this for 14 years now, and it
Right.
still hasn't happened. Nobody else is doing it, and I don't think that waiting more is going to fix the problem. So
Right.
we finally decided to take the problem, the issue into our own hands.
Right. And on your fact, you do also mention though that the possibility of having some kind of cosmetic skin support is on the table at least later on.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot. This is weird because like a lot of the people on the Discord have been asking for that, and sort of like, okay, well, if
Yeah.
if you guys insist, and in a sense, I guess it does make sense because like it's
Yeah.
something that doesn't matter to the gameplay. I mean, like Planetary Annihilation does it, StarCraft does it, and it works out fine.
Yeah.
But
Personally, I
yeah,
prefer it
so
to be client side. I can't stand looking at other people's skins. I just want it to be
yeah.
all default personally.
Yeah, I personally I feel the same way. I feel yeah. It's just like the one of those kinds of things where I'm like, okay, well maybe I'm not all seeing here, and maybe
Mm.
I'm missing the bigger picture, so I'll be open-minded, right?
Yeah.
But like personally, I don't go for that kind of stuff at all.
Yeah. Most competitive players just go into the graphics and turn them down to low right away. So, you know,
Uh,
different
yeah,
crowds, different approach to that, of course.
yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, what there, like I said before, there have been a lot of different iterations on this subgenre. What have you learned from these various different games, whether it's Zero K, Beyond All Reason, Rusted Warfare, Ashes of the Singularity, etc.? Are there any
A
things that
lot.
you've learned from those games that you're planning to bring to Sanctuary?
A lot. First of all, how like one of the things I felt that I've learned the most as I've been, following these titles like from their inception to their release,
Right.
is that you want to, you want to focus down on your formula and you want to respect the formula
Hmm.
of the gameplay, right? And there's certain formulas that deviate too far from what makes a good core gameplay loop.
Right.
And in that case, you're gonna have a resulting game that's just not hitting the same amount of audience. I really don't
Right.
know how better to put it, right? Like,
And
I feel like Ashes of the Singularity and Planetary Annihilation are particularly helpful examples
mm,
of like how to respect the community's wishes, right? Because
right.
they didn't. And I was among that community for both those titles, and they do deliver like in a new kind of recipe sort of way. And that really, does work. Like not for Ashes of Singularity. If you've seen like the Ashes of Singularity numbers lately,
Mm.
they're the game's dead.
Very
Um,
small player base. Yeah.
oh yeah. But yeah, if you look at like Planetary Annihilation, it's doing respectably well, right? It's got a
Mm.
Discord of like 7,000 members. It's quite respectable,
Right.
right? But it's probably not the what it was meant to be. Certainly not what the developers had in mind for this title.
Right.
They had in mind a lot longer scale, larger fan base,
Hmm.
and it definitely could have been. But I think that they transformed the recipe too much in a way that resulted in them not getting as many fans.
Are you referring to the planet element of the game, or?
Yeah. In particular, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that like that's how most people see it. Like personally, I'm the kind of guy who knew that that's what they were selling, and that knew what
Right.
kind of gameplay that would result in, and I was kind of fine with that. I was like, interesting. Let's have a new thing. Let's try it out. But I think that most people who went into the Kickstarter for this game and followed it and wanted to play it and everything had in mind something very different. They thought that like they didn't really kind of predict in their head what playing on a planet would look like. They kind of
Right.
imagine, well, it's going to be like similar, I guess, or maybe I just have like one side of the planet that I have to deal with, or I don't know what they were
Yeah.
thinking, but like they didn't really compute how much that could affect gameplay. And it's not like you can just wizard away with UI or whatever these gameplay changing designs.
Mm.
You are fundamentally changing the recipe, and there is different gameplay as a result, and there's like
Right.
no real way around that. So yeah, I think that that's like quite important.
Mm.
Like Sanctuary is gonna be a game that is on 2D map. Like it has,
Right.
your volume,
A
your
flat map
everything.
anyway.
Looking at it from above, and you have, one point of view. You're not,
Right.
like. Anyways, and then there's like there's other things with how, like, for example, Ashes of Singularity made their well, I think like a problem with Ashes of Singularity is mainly that they started to focus on, how much, attention we can get with like the big players in the game, AMD and all that stuff, and be more of a tech demo
Okay.
and the benchmark and stuff like that. Which was really interesting, because that is, fundamentally there's a lot of that going on, right? You're simulating thousands of projectiles, and it's grueling work, as I've explained, for computers, and they're really putting to work the hardware on those computers, because it can work on any number of GPUs, even cross-brand GPUs. So you can have like one GPU of AMD and one NVIDIA, and it still utilizes like 100% of the cores on each of those. And even I think it experimented at one point even with like cross CPU type. But yeah, so it was utilizing all the hardware on the computer very well, and it was using the new APIs, DirectX 12 as well as Vulkan and all that stuff. And so it was great, great advertisement, great relational stuff with all those big players, but not so much a game, right? And that's kind of like the problem, because the gamers trying to the gamers are the ones like feeding the whole endeavor. If no one's like playing this, then there's not going to be much more
Hmm.
development on it, and that's effectively what's happened, right?
Right.
Yeah, they promised, a lot with this title. They promised, what was it, 16 or 17 DLCs, at least three standalones.
Right.
That did not come to pass. I have a lifetime edition of Ashes and Singularity. I paid the full 90 euros for that.
Okay.
I did not get my money's worth, but that's life.
Right.
So yeah, I have like a personal experience with all of that, and
Right.
I think that I have much more of a close and hands-on notion of what the audience wants, right?
Right.
I can't, promise to cater to all of the different
Yeah.
RTS fans, because there's so many different flavors going on. There's so much, and that's part of what makes it so
Yeah.
rich, and what I love about RTS. It's really a deep genre. But with all the simulated projectile worlds,
Hmm.
and some and a little bit beyond, right? I think I can cater to all those fans,
Right.
and I think I can do it in a way that really really unites them. And I don't have to aim for like the full pie. Like I don't
Right.
care about having like every single RTS player under the sun, because that's not really achievable.
Right.
And so I think that that's like important, that I'm not like diluting what's the worth and what's the soul and everything of Sanctuary. I'm sticking to what it's promised to be, and what it's
Right.
yeah, and so as a result, I'm hoping that like the fans of the genre that have felt left out by the industry for a decade or more, will feel like there's finally something they could sink their teeth into and be really satisfied about.
Cool. Any particular mechanics from those games that you've been impressed by that you're looking to potentially, well, at least be influenced by in your own game?
You mean like in the simulated projectile
Yeah, yeah,
subgenre?
Zero K, Planetary Annihilation, Bar, etc.
Well, yeah, there's I mean like obviously all that's going on with the simulated projectiles. There's different like ways of implementing them and like Ashes is one example of like how not to do it well, right? If you have slip and slide units, AOE for every single one of the projectiles, and short ranges for the projectile distances, then it's effectively impossible to tell that the projectiles are simulated or not, right? They're
Right.
hitting all the time anyways. So why even bother? This is something that's also an issue in like 0K for me. And bar is that like you got like basically uh, hand combats with the units. It's the ranges are so minuscule. Sometimes like the unit himself is like longer in the model itself is like longer than the actual range that they can fire. So it's not even you're not really putting that to any use. Whereas if you go with really long ranges with like with battleships, for example, if you have a battleship that's firing its main guns and it can traverse incredible distances and stuff, there's like a lot of things that can happen before the projectiles can get to hit the ground, and they can collide with a lot of things in between like the in that distance. And so that's where it gets like really interesting. All those like crazy situations that you have in some of the most epic replays in Supreme Commander are situations where some of those situations like some of those scenes with projectile hitting what it wasn't supposed to at all, or colliding in a way that creates kind of a cascade of events. It's great. Those are like some of the most funny and interesting moments, right? So like, oh no, like I was, hovering my planes above the base, trying to defend it from incoming bombers and everything. Shot a nuke, and the nuke hit the planes. I nuked myself. I mean, like those are edge cases. Some of those
Yeah.
have hashed out and stuff like
They're
that.
not
But
funny
but
where they're happening to you in every case, are they?
no,
Not
yeah.
till after.
But like you get the idea, right? There's
Yeah.
like a real wealth of depth in simulated projectiles that I feel can still be delved into further and explored further. Like the more you allow them to express themselves, the more you make your gameplay and your balance about that. The more your game can explore that, and I think
Right.
that there's a lot to be explored there.
It can help it feel like a real battlefield to have these projectiles really
Absolutely.
going through space and hitting things.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like it's the kind of thing where it's even hitting you on a subconscious level. Like even when you're looking at like the battlefield globally, and it's just chaos and everything, subconsciously in your brain something kind of clicks and goes, well, I'm really kind of impressed with how realistic this feels, right? Something about it is hitting me as really realistic, and that's what's happening there, is that you've got this all this content that it would be impossible to like have random chance and everything thrown in there, and it still feel or look that realistic, right? And yeah, I mean, it just creates a type of gameplay that's very very engaging, like dodging shots with individual tanks. It never gets old. It's really really satisfying to do.
Yeah. That's a big part of Age
Zigzagging
of
very
Empires
very
Micro as
quickly.
well. It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, this is a game that like I feel this is game type that I feel melds micro and macro incredibly well, and
Yeah,
on extreme scales for both, but not in a way where it becomes impossible to manage, right?
yeah,
And that's what they've done. That's really brilliant with the UI is that you got something that you know. I mean, like Supreme Commander has done, you got a UI that allows you to be in control in a decent way of a lot of units, and even a little bit into the future. You get to plan out a lot, and that's something that Sanctuary is going to capitalize on.
right. Well, actually, I can't believe we haven't even brought this up yet. One of the features that particularly Supreme Commander was very innovative on was the strategic zoom. Are you looking to incorporate that in Sanctuary?
Yeah, absolutely. We already have that in Sanctuary.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I knew the answer. I've seen the. You can see it in your videos, but I still figured, formality. I should ask it as a question.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so
Absolutely.
there will be strategic zoom,
Yeah.
which is I always thought was a really cool feature.
It's a fundamental tool. It's a fundamental tool to the degree that Total Annihilation didn't release with this feature. That was like the
Yeah.
big, kind of step forward that was taken with Supreme Commander. And
Yeah.
as soon as it was out in Supreme Commander, and the Total Annihilation guys and modders were like, oh my God, we got to put that in quickly. And so they
Right.
modded that in. And so yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
maybe we
yeah.
should explain what it is for anybody who doesn't know. So the idea is that you can zoom out all the way, like as far as the entire map covers up your screen, and at a certain point, the units are replaced by icons, so that it's still readable and you can still issue meaningful orders to your troops. Is that a fair description of it?
Yeah, it's a fair description. Basically, your entire screen is the minimap. It's the main
Yeah.
view and the minimap simultaneously. And the key factor is that, it has to do both and do both well to the degree where you can utilize them, fully without feeling that you've lost any of either. And that's
Right.
that's what, strategic zoom does incredibly well. The strategic icons are all unique, and so you have all of the information when you're fully zoomed out. It's not like the
Right.
the, the typical mini map where you just have blobs of color, and you can't really make sense of that. Not only that, but you can interact with 100% of it. So, zoomed in, obviously you're going to be able to click and drag your box, or select a unit, or double click to select a type of unit, and everything that's within your viewpoint. But when you're completely zoomed out, you can do all of those things as well, just selecting directly the icons, and then you have no limits on any of the inputs that you can do, whether you're zoomed out or zoomed in. You can play with either, and obviously you're going to play with both. You're gonna be zooming out and zooming in
Right.
constantly to interact on a more precise level or interact on a less precise level. It's not that you can't do that, do those on those different zoom levels. It's just that it's easier, right? If you want to select a selection box around those units specifically, well, just zoom in a little bit first, and then you'll have like you'll be able to make that selection box in a much more specific, precise way, right? It's just
Right.
talking about like mouse movements, right? No
Yeah.
matter how precise your mouse is, your hand is not always doing like precisely what you want. So adding that's where I'm talking about detail. But
Right.
yeah, it's an incredibly useful tool, and this is something that we've incorporated. We have in Sanctuary, we have the ability to queue up orders in the future as well. It's something where you say, okay, well, you're going to go to this place, and then or attack that, or take back this bit of resources.
Right.
And you can plan ahead, and obviously modify the plan by visualizing it. You can now click and drag the waypoint for an order, right? This is something that's basically implemented in like other games like StarCraft and Age of Empires and all that stuff. They also have waypoints and etc.
Yeah.
The difference here is that like you can plan a lot more ahead, and you can modify them and edit them. Like this order in the middle of the waypoint queue, I want to like delete it.
Right.
You can do that. You can
So
like move
how
it
does
to
that
another
work? Do you
point.
select the waypoint on the map, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in games like this, usually there's like an ETA as well, which is not normal in say StarCraft or Age of Empires.
Yeah. It can be useful to like know when when this order set is gonna be complete, and then you
Right.
can plan around that. It's not like the most useful feature in the world, but
It's a neat little touch. Will there be a mini map as well as strategic zoom, or is strategic zoom meant to replace it?
So we'll probably implement it if we do get a successful Kickstarter. It's
Right.
something that like not really hard to add in, and it really once we have the time to focus on secondary things like that, we can
Right.
definitely
Right.
do it. And I don't see any reason why not. Like for example, Supreme Commander also does have that. You do
Yeah.
have a map that you can turn on top of that. And competitively, it's actually used a lot. Like a lot of players have a mod that turn it on and off depending on your zoom level. So when you're zoomed in, you have like the mini map pop in, and this is on top
Okay.
of like
Cool. Yeah.
having like a secondary screen where on the secondary screen you have the full mini map version and everything. Just sometimes adding a little bit of extra rear view mirror and stuff like that allows
Yeah,
you to.
exactly. It's really good for even if you're not really using it to click around because you have the strategic zoom. Just for map awareness, it can be very useful to have a mini
Yeah.
map.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, well, clicking around, I'm glad you point that out because that's like one of the things to note there is that strategic zoom is not only useful for, issuing orders in micro versus macro and both combined and all that stuff. It's also useful for moving around the map. Like,
Yeah.
typically players have the use of like recording cameras and stuff, and until they've recorded the cameras, generally they use the mini map, like click on it, and that moves the camera.
Right.
You can also do that in Supreme Commander, but nobody does that, especially not competitively,
Yeah.
because zooming in and zooming out is so much faster, like by a lot. It's really, really like intuitive,
Yeah.
and once you've done it once, you realize how much faster it can be. Like the mouse keys for the arrow keys for moving the screen or the edge penning, both
Yeah.
of those things are insanely slow. Like no matter how much acceleration you have on that,
Yeah.
you'll never get to the point where you can get to like this very specific point or and to this other very specific points.
Yeah.
Like it's no contest. It's
Yeah.
just so much faster with zoom out and zoom in.
Screen panning is a bad habit of mine that I think Age of Empires kind of engenders because we have these really convenient, like Control A goes to archery range, Control B goes to barracks. So that's a bad habit of mine. I notice whenever I do play a a game with strategic zoom that like you easily really get used to like you zoom out, you move your mouse a little bit to where you want to go, and then you zoom in again. It's a much more efficient way to do it.
Yeah. And once you've gotten to the other point, you can make your camera safe point and everything like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, so you will
yeah.
have camera hotkeys like in StarCraft.
Well, yeah, we want to do that. Like, we don't know if that's one of the features we can have. It's not
Right. Right.
hard to make. Again, it's like there's just such a big list of things to
Right.
to implement everything. But obviously, that's on the pile of things that we want to, and it's
Of
useful
course.
for multiplayer experience, which is what we're trying to build right now.
Yeah. So support the Kickstarter, people. So you've also mentioned a little bit about like movement properties with your units. You're looking to do some more subtle things with like turn radius and formations. You also mentioned like proper bridge pathing, which I can't think of a single RTS that's ever done before. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. So our fortunately, the guy who codes our pathfinding and everything coded it in a way that would be compatible with 3D terrain, which is to say, you're going to have one place where there's like an overpass or something like that. It doesn't matter. It's 3D. Basically, instead of having 2D pathfinding, which is what every RTS has, you can really operate in 3D space.
Does
If
that put
you're imagining a nav mesh, right, you have like your navigated thing and everything like that. Say you have a bridge. Well, there's maybe this bit of the nav mesh that clips to the rest of the nav mesh that's adding on top to it. So it's pathable here, but it's also pathable here, and now there's like two layers of it. When it's translated into the actual game, you have like this bridge that's there, and that means that you can order units to go above it and order units to go under it, and those units can like probably interact, like shoot up
Right.
or shoot down at each other. With the and yeah, I keep forgetting to mention this, but like an obvious advantage of simulating your projectiles is that you get things like longer range for high grounds naturally, right? Because
Right.
it happens like that. You have your arc. Well, we're not sure if we
Right.
absolutely want to implement that because it's not like as what you see is what you get a mechanic. So,
Right.
that's still under debate, but it's a natural benefit that we can exploit if we want of simulated projectiles. Anyways, yeah, we would in that scenario be allowing units to interact with each other in these two separate layers,
Hmm.
into two separate heights, and maybe there's like more. There doesn't have to be just two, right? You can have a lot of different like heights and layers at which the units are interacting. And I think that unlocks like a lot of things in terms of map design. Maybe we can have
Right.
maps that are like just like they have this big funnel going into the center, and all these different steps of the funnel. There's like layers, and you can like you can pretty much we want to keep it to something where you're still like using a single camera for everything, right? So
Right.
hopefully it's something like it's pretty evident. Like maybe we make the bridge go transparent when there's units going underneath, and that's what we would do for the layers. But we don't want to avoid like having too many layers and stuff like that where it becomes hard to see what's going on, right?
Right.
But if you're playing with right the angle of the camera as well as how these what part of the different layers are pathable and everything, you can really, I think, create maps that are both top-down view and have a lot of interactability with the different heights, with the different
Right.
layers, right?
Would the bridges act as cover for units potentially because of the fact that they're simulated projectiles? Like, would they
Yeah,
hit the top of the
obviously.
bridge?
This is terrain, right? The
Right.
bridge is
Right.
terrain. So if the projectile's hitting the
Right.
bridge, well, it's being blocked.
Right.
So yeah, that adds a lot of like kind of overhead or complexity for us in terms of the code, because we do want the
Mhm.
units to be like relatively smart, and this is another one of those things that I don't think that we'll have time to implement with just for this January. But
Mm.
we do want to have like more per unit calculations, per unit AI, where they're
Okay.
trying to determine, well, can I actually hit that? Am I wasting my time trying to shoot at that? Maybe I should just
Mm.
get to the next target, right?
Right.
Which is something that doesn't exist in all the previous games that we've mentioned, right? That
Hmm.
if they have a hill in the way in those other games, they'll just shoot at the hill, right?
Right.
And they'll do that indefinitely, and they're like, well, the target's still there, so I
Yeah.
just gotta shoot.
Will
But yeah,
will the terrain be destructible in any way? Any plans for that?
that's a good question. So the answer is like partially, like definitely not for lower tier units, and we want it to
Right.
be where it's not really hampering the gameplay. So we have
Yeah.
this idea that like the Dyson sphere, which is like this place that you're the surface of the place that you're fighting over,
Right.
is actually self-repairing. So for like minor amounts of damage and everything, the well, if it's made like someplace unpathable, it'll like repair over time. Not
Right.
like huge fractures or something like that. And like the smaller things where you just had an explosion there and the decal and all that stuff, the decal will stay. But yeah, we do want to have something where we're not like introducing a mechanic that can really destroy the gameplay. You know what I mean? Like if
Right.
you if you
Right.
can fully destroy the terrain, with units, then this is like cheesable to no extent, right? And it would
Yeah.
be very hard to balance it correctly. Not impossible to balance.
Yeah.
Again, with given time and expertise, anything is balanceable. But we don't have a whole lot of time,
Right.
so we want to again not stack the odds against ourselves.
Yeah.
So we want to be really careful with destructible terrain. So yeah, we're really picking that one up with chopsticks right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we think that like for like really late game units, those like really big honking mechs and everything like that, where you're basically, you're ending the game now. You're
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
game territory. Those guys are probably fine to like really wreck the terrain and like do some really impressive stuff. But like for the rest of the units in the game, we don't want that because otherwise, then you can just do that on purpose
Right.
to basically be anti game. You know what I mean? Like anti.
You don't want to
Uh,
trivialize the importance of the terrain by making it too destructible.
yeah, yeah.
I was thinking more of like, could maybe an artillery shell hits a bridge that these units are hiding from projectiles underneath, it crushes them or something like that. Is that sort of
That,
thing possible?
yeah, that is possible, not within our current budget, but
Okay,
absolutely it
right.
is. We have already looked at like a lot of the well, we're making our game in Unity, right? And
Right.
there's like lots of really interesting libraries and assets that you can buy, and one of them that we did get and everything is one that allows us to slice and dice, 3D models, whatever. It can be props, units, whatever, and then you can have like more or less procedural destruction, right? And it looks really nice, right? You can, if you throw in FX on top of that, it looks like really convincing, like a building falling apart or something like that, right?
Right.
And so that instantly got us thinking, like, oh my God, like we could do like a building that like topples over on top of the units and stuff like that. So we definitely wanna look into that, and that isn't something that we can guarantee. It's definitely
Right.
going to be like a Kickstarter video. But yeah, this is like something that we want to do. For the bridge, I'm not quite sure. It would be really interesting. What I'm worried about here is that we have to like recalculate the nav mesh. Might not be too hard actually. We'll see.
Okay, does the 3D pathing make air units colliding a possibility? Just a fringe
Could
case
be
that
like
occurred to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good question, but like what we're already like looking at is how we can make air more interesting, because air is
Right.
kind of a sticking point for a lot of these games and for games in general. Like
I agree.
especially in games where where air is allowed to be faster than land, which is what it should be, in the real world, right?
Yeah.
If you look at how it's balanced in StarCraft, right? Air is generally like slower than land, or
Yeah.
like a lot of the air units are. And that makes it work. That makes it work for like StarCraft One
Yeah.
and StarCraft. But yeah, this is a game that's more about like simulator projectile and more realism, all that stuff. So air units being able to go at the speeds that they would go, or like nearby, is
Right.
a lot of the fun. But then you have to balance that, and I think one of the things that like was really missing was that you had no collisions for air units at all, and so you could just stack
Right.
them on one another, and then you had what was dubbed the ball of death, the air ball of death, where you had like
Right.
you clump those units intentionally together, because the DPS output of that as a result is just it
Yeah.
synergizes with it incredibly well.
Like the
And
Brood
the
War
more
Mutalisk stacking thing.
better yeah, you have this one range basically for this set of units that can dish out like a hell of a lot of damage. So several solutions to that. One is clumpability isn't a thing, which is very hard to do because players are always going to try to find little exploits that you can't have planned for. The other
Right.
thing that they can't really trick around is AOE. If you have a lot of AOE, then that's kind of like seals the deal, right? If you're
Yeah.
clumping all units together, then you're dooming them to very very easy fates that your opponent can now he has an answer to that. Now he has what is it? What's the name for it? Like the damn it, I forgot the term. There's like there's a term for when you can respond to a certain thing in RTS with something that defeats it.
Hard counter?
Whole hard counter. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now there's a hard counter to that. So that's what we
Right.
want, right? Put the tools in the hand of the players for balance to work
Yeah.
for the players.
The
So
commander
yeah.
unit is a pretty good safety net for air unit shenanigans too, in my experience.
How so?
They can shoot them, can they not?
Well, that's in TA.
Oh,
That's in
okay,
TA.
I'm out of date.
Annihilation Commander can shoot air. In Supreme Commander, it can't.
Okay, fair
And
enough. My mistake.
no worries at all. And yeah, that's something that I think like we want to keep. I'm not quite sure about that, but like it doesn't really, unless like the DPS is crazy there. But like
Hmm.
I think even in TA, like the damage for the commander shooting air was quite good, and air units that were quite paper, but it still wasn't really any type of hard counter to air like at all.
Right.
And yeah, in like in Planetary Annihilation as well. Even though in Planetary Annihilation, the commander can also shoot air units. I think they kept that.
Right.
But in Supreme Commander, also like the air units absolutely like they can dominate pretty much. It's
Okay.
like it's balanced by the fact that you gotta build those different armies, right? If
Right.
you're putting all your eggs into the air basket, well then you're neglecting the naval and the land basket. And if you're doing that, well then that's what the opposing player is going to capitalize on, and that's the reason you're going to
Right.
lose. But that's not enough of an answer to us because there is definitely in our mind an issue with air balance where air snowballs a lot more than the rest
Right.
of the armies, and that's problematic because that means that well, like a lot of the competitive scene leans towards well, late game it's gonna be air, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you're gonna have like a lot of the other things going on, obviously, but you're mostly for your commander, for your king piece, you're mostly worrying about air coming in, and that's the thing that's gonna do the snipe, right?
Right.
So so yeah, we wanna make it so like there's more of there's more comebacks, from these situations, and I think that's like there's mechanics there, but there's also balance there. There's many different things that can be done to address that.
Right. You mentioned naval units, and I believe that is another one of the things that will be Kickstarter dependent. Is that correct?
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Yeah. You also mentioned that you want to place more emphasis on verticality in the maps, budget depending. What kind of mechanics are you planning? You mentioned the additional range that simulated projectiles allow you from higher levels of elevation. Any other mechanics related to verticality that you're sort of throwing around?
Well, I mean, like if you're, I don't know quite yet. Like in terms of what could be implemented in the gameplay, I just think that like maps with more verticality going on are interesting in terms of like what that means for how you evolve through that particular map, right? One of the things that like happens with maps is that generally they're very linear, right?
Hmm.
You start over here in this corner, your opponent starts over there in this corner, and you're moving towards that corner. And sometimes the map is going to be choke pointed in a way that makes you go an S or something like that
Right.
towards your opponent. But maybe you can do something a little bit more complicated than that. Maybe you have to first go down there and then you're actually going above this bridge, but that there's another there's like different passages, and then it's quite interesting because then units that are like on different routes can also cross themselves. Like I mentioned that tanks would be able to shoot up to bridge and down from bridges.
Hmm.
So all these units that are potentially on different paths that are not necessarily ready to meet out on the open battlefield yet, or that are not they're on their way to that, but they're on different roads and they can still cross and stuff like that at different points. I think that there's a lot that can be done there, and that would change how you're progressing in your takeover of the map and your map control, right?
Right.
I think that would spice up the dynamic there. I don't think it needs to go like far beyond that. I mean,
Mm.
like maybe we could look at like having, okay, you're at this layer of height that allows for the tanks there to shoot at air, right? That could
Mm.
be a thing, but like I don't think that would necessarily be as interesting as all the design philosophies that this unlocks in terms of map design. Um, yeah, so that's mainly what I'm thinking there. Like all
Right.
the layers that we're giving players to play with, thanks to the 3D pathfinding. That's mainly it. But yeah, I mean, like also there's like the whole thing with like buildings. Maybe the buildings are big destructible elements that fall on top of the units, and that
Right.
can also change the navigatability of the map, right? Because it's toppled over and it's made this new obstacle, or perhaps this new bridge, right?
Right.
That could totally be a thing, and that would make the map really evolve through the course of the gameplay. And obviously, it's interacting with you, right?
Mm.
If that building is crushing your units or blocking your path, it definitely is something that is part of the gameplay.
Cool. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, is there anything else about the game that you want to talk about that we haven't brought up yet?
Um, well, I mean, like I want to keep some of my cards in my hand for
Right.
like the Kickstarter.
Of course.
There's gonna be a Kickstarter with a good video, and the video is gonna
Hmm.
be revealing a lot of the elements that we've held up until this point, because we've come up with some ideas that we feel push the genre forward, right?
Hmm.
There's a certain genre in this subcategory of RTS, and it's been evolving through the years, thanks to modders, thanks to all the things that have come and gone, the titles themselves, but also the mods that have been made on these titles. And so yeah, there's some of that where we're evolving the medium towards a gameplay that would be more interesting, but keeping it like open to all the different flavors that are available in this type of game of RTS. But also like there's certain mechanics and certain gameplay elements or pieces
Mm.
that will be revealed in this Kickstarter. So I unfortunately I don't want to get into them now.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of things that I can get into that we haven't already. I mean, uh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Fair
Well,
enough. So stay
check.
tuned is basically the answer. We'll hear more in December then.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I mean, like, our website is a great place for information. We have
Right.
devlogs that we're
That's
publishing weekly there now.
right.
We have lots of videos on the YouTube. We're
Yep.
publishing a lot of
I'll leave links for
content
those
there.
below.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's sanctuary-rts.com, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah. And ETA on when we can get our hands on it? Beta-wise, first of
Well,
all?
huh?
Beta first, I
Beta?
suppose? Yeah.
I would say somewhere around like don't quote me on that, but
Right.
maybe on 2022.
Okay.
And like hopefully the final version of the game, the one that 1.0,
Right.
that would be somewhere in January of 2023.
All right. So anywhere you'd like to direct people watching this to support the game, check it out, that sort of thing. It's the website, YouTube,
The best place is the Discord,
Discord.
because you will be like directly able to message us, suggest ideas to us, and just follow along with all the development and modeling and etc. that's taking place. We post most everything there. Obviously, like I said, some things are posted to the Patreon first, but the
Right.
Discord is really where it's at, and it's already got a really big community. We've got 2,200 people there, going on 2,300. It's growing quite
Nice.
fast. Yeah, and it's a really nice community. It's incredibly nice. Like all the people are just like the most genuine, heartfelt people. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So thanks so much for doing this. Any last things you want to say to our audience here?
Well, I'm an RTS fan too. I've been waiting for an RTS for a long time. This, developing this is kind of a dream come true, and at the same time, it's like the accumulation of years and years of anticipation. I think that I can like sympathize with what all of you out there feel, and what I'm trying to bring to you is what I've been waiting for myself. So I think we're on the same wavelength there, and yeah, I hope that like Sanctuary will be the RTS that all of us have been waiting for.
All right. Cool. Can't wait to get my hands on it myself. So thanks again.
Thank you.